Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in February. So February was kind of a weird month for me. It was turbulent is like the best way to describe it. I ended up having a family member pass away, and then all throughout the month of February, my company that I work for was moving buildings. I work for a lab, and that involves a lot of moving of equipment and then recalibrating all of the equipment. And so there were a lot of bumps in the road with that, and I was just it was just like a really strange month. Somehow I did manage to get 5 books read, which is only one less than in January. So I count that as a win, considering how crazy and just busy life-wise it was. So I guess without rambling too much more, I am just gonna go through the 5 books that I read, give you a bit of a general overview of them. If they're books in a series, I'm just gonna kind of describe what the first book is about, and then I'll give you my thoughts on them. So the first book that I read is one that is probably my most anticipated book for 2021, and that is The Mask Falling by Samantha Shannon. So this is the 4th book in the Bone Season series. This is a dystopian science fiction fantasy series, bordering or leaning more towards science fiction, that is in a futuristic world. I think it's in the 2050s. Clairvoyants exist. They've always existed, but being clairvoyant is illegal. What I mean by being clairvoyant is that it's not necessarily just seeing the future, but it's seeing the spirit world and being able to interact with that. And so it has been deemed illegal. So we follow our main character, Paige Mahoney, who is a clairvoyant, and one day she gets arrested, and when she's taken to the prison, it turns out that this prison is just kind of a holding place for where her true destination is. And when she gets to her true destination, she opens up a whole underground world of government conspiracy to the magnitude that she could never have imagined. So the first 3 books take place in London or in areas around London. This book actually takes place in Paris. What I really loved about this was that having it be in Paris really allowed Samantha Shannon to take a whole nother step in the world building. She got to create a whole other underground clairvoyant system, really play with the setting a lot, and she picked different historical sites in Paris, and we had a lot of really pivotal events in those sites, which was distressing but also a lot of fun to read about. Obviously this is a 4th book, and it's the 4th book in a 7-book series, but in this book I feel like it was really pivotal to the series in general, because there are so many things that really get explored deeper. We get a lot of explanations and lots of uncoverings and revealings, but while that happens, we also get so many more questions, as well as we get new players on the board. And even though things were brought to light, they a lot of times ended up creating more questions. I think there was just a lot of progress made in the general grander scheme of the story in this one compared to the other 3, where obviously there was progress made, but this one, I felt like this one was really pivotal for the series as a whole. We also have a lot of character development and exploration for Paige and Arcturus, who is the other main character in this story. What I really liked was that Shannon took a lot of time exploring Paige's healing from the trauma that she experienced in the song Rising. There's not only just the emotional healing, but also a lot of physical healing too. It really happens throughout the entirety of this book. She doesn't just kind of touch on it in the beginning and then move on. So I just really appreciated that it was not only touched upon, but really given a lot of care and detail. I feel like it just aided a lot more in giving a better picture of her as a character as well. You know, we've spent now 3 books leading into this with her, but there's just, I feel like we still are learning about Paige and really getting to know her, and I felt like this one really hit home with her character and also Arcturus's character. I feel like we learned a lot about him as well, and I really loved how we got some time with just the 2 of these characters, truly getting to know each other more, and getting to gain each other's trust and rely on one another. It just made me love the characters even more. I love them so much. I will say the ending of this didn't happen. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. It did not happen. I'm in denial. That ending was too much for me, and it was a beautifully written ending, actually. Throughout the whole ending sequence of events, there was lots of parallels to pages past, and even before the first 3 books, when she was a child, and then there's parallels pulled from events during the first 3, and then events that even happened in here, and it was beautifully written, but I hated what happened. I hated it, and there was something big that was heavily implied, and I don't believe it. Didn't happen. I've always loved Shannon's writing, from the style to the world building to the characters from both this series and the Priority of the Orange Tree, but I think this by far is her best work yet, and I gave this 5 stars. So the next book that I read was Deadly Dreams by K.J. Sutton. This is the 3rd book in the Fortuna Sworn series. The Fortuna Sworn series is a dark fantasy romance with a heavy emphasis on dark. So if you're ever interested in reading this series, I highly recommend looking at the trigger warnings for this, not only the first book, but just the series as a whole. I know for each book on Goodreads, KJ Sutton has listed the trigger warnings below. I will also list them down below, specifically for Deadly Dreams, down in the description below, and I will also be listing trigger warnings for The Mask Falling in the description below. Because there are a couple that should be considered. In the first book, Fortuna Sworn, we follow Fortuna, the main character. She's a nightmare, meaning that if she touches anybody, she can instantly sense what they're afraid of and then project hallucinations for them of their fears. And so she's one of the last of her kind. And her brother went missing 2 years ago, her brother also being a nightmare. And she's kind of been searching for him, but has been come up with a lot of dead ends. And so 2 years after her brother goes missing, she runs into a Fey man. He says that he has information on where her brother is, but will only tell her and help her find him if she agrees to marry him first. And from there, the story really takes off in ways that I never imagined it would take off. But this is a pretty fast-paced story, which I really enjoy. But I read Deadly Dreams, the 3rd book, in February, and this book is quite a bit slower than the first 2. This is another book that actually spends a lot of time exploring characters' trauma and the aftermath from the previous books. So in Restless Slumber, the 2nd book, the whole end sequence, both Fortuna and Colith, 2 of the main characters, go through very different traumatic events, and then going into Deadly Dreams, we spend a lot of time mostly with Fortuna, since the story is told from her point of view, but we also see Colith as well, kind of coming to terms with what they experienced and the mental and physical toll that it took on both of them. I really think that that's important in terms of character development, but also just a sense of realism to the story. You know, we get so many fantasy stories where all these characters go through just really like harrowing, dangerous events, and then like 10 pages later they're fine. Whereas like realistically that's not the case, and if you really want to relate to the characters, I think giving them time to heal is really important. And we not only get to see how this trauma affects Fortuna and Colith, but we see how it affects those around them, and how relationships are strengthened. There's different sides to the characters that we see during this book. And there's a lot of character exploration and character development that goes on in this book. So something that was really fun about this book was that we get some really well-known characters from popular folklore involved in this story, and I don't want to spoil who it is, but think like how everybody knows Baba Yaga, the witch with the house and the chicken legs. Like that type of like infamous name There's two of them that appear in this story, and I really liked Sutton's decision to incorporate characters like that because we have all of these different creatures. Obviously, there are infamous characters that are those creatures that have shown up in classic folklore and timeless tales that we know about, and so incorporating them into the story kind of almost gives another connection to our reality, making it more of an urban fantasy, making it feel more like this is in our world. And I really liked it, and I really liked some of the decisions that Sutton made and how she characterized these different characters and stuff, and how she incorporated them into the story. I found it really interesting, and it was just a lot of fun to see them pop up on the page. I feel like this book and The Mask Falling, I had a lot of similar feelings about it. I was so upset about both of the endings for both of these books, but instead of being upset with and in denial of the events that happened, like I was in The Mask Falling, I'm more just upset with character decisions, because these events at the end are all character decision driven, whereas the events at the end of The Mask Falling were really for the most part out of the characters' hands. But in terms of Deadly Dreams and how I was really upset and really frustrated with the characters' decisions, I can't be mad at Sutton for choosing to have the characters make those decisions because they fit the characters so well. If they made any other decision that I wanted them to make, it wouldn't have fit the character. And so I can't be too mad. I feel like Sutton does a really good job of ending each book, not necessarily on a cliffhanger, but on a point where it is a good place to stop the story, but it's like a little dangling teaser of like what's next to come, and like a no way kind of a punchy ending, if that makes sense. I am very excited for Beautiful Nightmares, which is the next book that comes out, and I think it comes out at the end of this year. So very excited for that, and I did give Deadly Dreams 4 stars. So the third book that I read was Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. I actually listened to the audiobook on Scribd, narrated by Inés del Castillo, and I do want to say shout out to her. I think she did a great job narrating. I don't have a lot of experience with audiobooks. This is only the second one I've listened to, but I did really enjoy her narration. So Catherine House follows our main character Inez as she gets accepted to this school called Catherine House. So at this school, it's a college of sorts, where it's a highly exclusive, very isolated college that you go for 3 years. Most of the graduates end up becoming huge, influential politicians, movie stars, presidents, writers, artists, really, really big, popular, successful names come out of this school, and that's what it's famous for. So we follow Inez as she goes to this school, and while she's there, she kind of starts to uncover something strange about the school. I liked the atmosphere that this book gave. It's a very dreamy atmosphere, and I wanted to be there, and I think that Thomas did a really good job of creating that. However, there wasn't a plot to this book. Now, I will say I don't mind books that don't have a very structured or definitive plot. I actually do have a video that I plan to film here pretty soon, discussing 2 books that are commonly criticized for that I think like that was the whole purpose, was for them to not have a very structured plot because they serve a different purpose. However, I couldn't find that different purpose in Catherine House and its lack of plot. You really are just following Inez as she goes through her 3 years at school, and kind of accidentally ends up uncovering some of the more sinister things of the school along the way. Because a lot of the events just felt mundane, they didn't really feel like there was a driving force to any end goal besides her education and her graduation. I didn't find the more dark or sinister occurrences very hard-hitting. They were kind of few and far between, and I just, by that point, by the time they started happening, I kind of didn't care about the story anymore. I was just listening because I didn't have the energy that week to actually sit down and read a book, and I just wanted to kind of mindlessly do something else while I listened to a story. I just had a hard time really getting into this book once I realized that there just wasn't anything going on. I also had a problem with how the pinnacle moment where we reached the climax and then chased our way down to the end of the book, it didn't fit the character, in my opinion. Inez made a decision and she started talking about things. I didn't know where they came from. I didn't quite understand where she was saying all of this stuff. It just didn't fit with what I had listened to about her the whole rest of the book. I did like how this book ended. This is one of those books that I actually enjoyed having an open end to it. Most of the time I get really frustrated with that, but I think Thomas ended it in such a way that it made sense to have it end open-ended. The point that she picked to cut off the story, I think, was one of the best points to pick. Most of the time I think those points in other books are poorly picked, but this one I really enjoyed it. Because I did enjoy the atmosphere of the story, I did end up rating this 2.5 stars. So the fourth book that I read in February was The Dating Plan by Sarah Desai. This is a contemporary romance novel. So this book follows Daisy and Liam, and both of them are in positions where their families are pushing them to get married. And neither of them want to get married, neither of them have any interest in marriage, but they end up running into each other after 10 years of not seeing each other. They grew up as childhood friends, and they strike a deal to have a fake engagement. And in order to legitimize their engagement, they go on a series of dates, and soon find out that this may not be a fake relationship much longer. The best word I can describe this book is cute. This book is so cute. I'm not a romance reader. It's not a genre I really gravitate towards, but I've heard of several very cute stories that I've just kind of really been interested in when I'm in the mood for that sort of story. And I am really, really happy that I ended up picking this one up. I adored both of these characters, both Liam and Daisy, equally. So obviously this is a romance novel, so it's the story is revolving around their relationship, but Desai takes a lot of time to really focus on the characters themselves and their own personal lives and personal problems separate from the other character. And I think that she just did a really good job of having them help each other, but never having the one character fix or solve the other character's problems, if that makes sense. This book takes time to really focus on the idea of self-love and self-acceptance before loving another person, and I just really appreciate that, and I think that she did a good job writing that. Like I said, I adored both these characters. They're both so very, very different from one another, but they complement each other so well, and that was really focused upon. It was not necessarily like, oh, you're different and we're gonna have problems. It was, oh, you're different, but we work so well together because of our differences, and we lean on each other for the other person's strengths. And it was a really cute dynamic, and that's one of my favorite dynamics in relationships, in books, in shows, in movies, and in real life. I really like when people pull on each other's strengths and lean on each other instead of pointing out each other's differences as flaws. And I think Desai excels at writing witty banter and dialogue. This book was funny at times. Like, I did not expect to find it so funny, but I did. I really enjoyed it, and I think there was just cute, funny events. There was cute, funny dialogue. All in all, this was a really cute book, and I gave it 4 stars. So the last book that I read in February is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gahn. This is a YA historical fantasy. It's a retelling of Romeo and Juliet set in 1920s Shanghai, where Romeo and Juliet are Roma and Juliet, and they are heirs to rival gangs. And in Shanghai, there's not only the gang politics and the rivalry there, but there is a monster and a madness sweeping through the city that Roma and Juliet have to then unwillingly team up together to figure out. I had heard so much about this book and I had really, really high hopes for it, but unfortunately it did fall a bit short for me. I think Chloe Gahn does a really good job of really relying on her historical setting and creating this atmosphere of the Roaring 20s while in Shanghai during all of the political turmoil of not just the rival gangs that she created, but also just Shanghai really during that time period where there was foreign powers and the Communist Party all grappling for control over this really torn city. And I think that I wasn't expecting this book to have such a strong political plotline, but I was really excited about it once I realized that that was the case, and I really enjoyed how she managed to really incorporate that into the story. I will say I had a problem with the pacing of this book. It felt really slow, and normally I don't mind slow books, especially if the characters that we're following, like, they have high stakes, they're being pushed against from all sides, and that was the case for both Romeo and Juliet, but I just couldn't really get, like, 100% involved in the story, and I think that's because unfortunately Chloe Gahn seems to be suffering from what I call the debut YA strong female character syndrome. And what I mean by that is I kind of see this trend in debut YA novels where a lot of authors, when they have to write a strong, brash female character, it comes across as too much. Like, they're trying too hard to write this character. The character feels almost cheesy or fake or just very unnatural. And unfortunately that was the case for Juliet for me. And I was really sad about this because I love glamorous murder ladies. Like, I love those characters, and that's who Juliet was supposed to be, but she just really felt overly forced to me, and I just could not jive with her character very well. Whereas Roma, on the other side, he's kind of supposed to be the opposite of Juliet, and instead he feels very underdeveloped to me. Like, I kind of struggled to really picture who he was supposed to be as a character. This was like so much of a problem for me to really care about these two characters that I honestly enjoyed when we got little snippets from side characters' perspectives a whole lot more than when we got the story told from our two main characters' perspectives. I think another kind of factor that played into this was that some of the dialogue felt really almost awkward and stilted, to the point where it felt too formal. It didn't feel like anything that people would say or how people would word things. It felt too formal is the best way that I can describe it. In general, I did enjoy this book enough that I do plan on picking up Our Violent Ends, which is the sequel to this book, and it comes out I think in November. I do plan to pick it up. I am a little worried with how this book ended that Our Violent Ends is going to be kind of a rehashing of a lot of the events that happen in this book. I do think Chloe Gahn shows a lot of promise, and so I have high hopes that she's going to prove me wrong in this, which is why I am looking forward to picking up the book, because I do really hope that this being her second book, we will get kind of a better writing of Juliet and Roma. And in the end, I gave this book 3 stars. So these are the books that I read in February. These 3 plus Deadly Dreams by KJ Sutton and Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. I will leave links to the Goodreads synopses for each of these books down in the description below if you have any interest in checking them out. But for now, I think I'm going to end this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear what you read in February. If you've read any of these books, down in the comments below. I hope you consider sticking around and subscribing. But other than that, I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching. Bye!